Good afternoon, friends. In today's conversation, I want to discuss a very important topic that affects many people who have crossed the age of 70. We are often shown advertisements for amazing trips, bright photos of new cities, and attractive offers from airlines. But few people mention the real difficulties and dangers that older travelers may face if they are not properly prepared. Today, we will examine in detail why trips at this age can become a difficult test and what reasons can turn a pleasant trip into a real problem. Don't rush to leave. At the end, I'll tell you how to protect yourself and make the trip more comfortable. Stay with me until the very end, because the last reason can surprise even seasoned tourists. Irina, many people dream of traveling regardless of age, because you can discover new cities, cultures, and people at any age. But I would like to remind you that with age, it is especially important to carefully monitor your health, finances, and possible risks. We often watch videos of bloggers or read articles that talk about carefree travel, exciting adventures, and endless excursions. However, in real life, the situation can be completely different. From an unexpected illness to unforeseen expenses and stressful situations that people over 70 face much more seriously. Traveling becomes more difficult if you want to truly enjoy your trip and not turn it into a source of anxiety. To do this, it is important to understand what exactly can go wrong and what measures will help to avoid troubles. Let's get straight to the point. Here is a list of the main reasons why traveling in adulthood is often accompanied by dangers and difficulties. However, we will not just list these reasons, but also tell you how to properly prepare for the trip, as well as what solutions will help to minimize the risks. Don't leave. It will be interesting and undoubtedly useful. If you are new to this channel, think about whether it is worth subscribing. Here, we share valuable advice on how to live a full and active life, even in old age. Now let's get started. Increased vulnerability of health and the likelihood of sudden exacerbations is the first and perhaps the most noticeable reason. At 20 or 30 years old, even a serious cold is often tolerated without any problems, and short-term malaise has almost no effect on everyday life. But at 70, every little thing can develop into serious complications. Cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, high blood pressure, all these factors gradually become an integral part of the lives of older people. Imagine a common situation. You are going on a long flight to another country with a different climate and food, where no one speaks your language. If you suddenly feel ill, and there are no friends, translators, or doctors nearby, the risk increases significantly. The risk of serious complications increases. Often, small medical institutions do not have the necessary equipment for comprehensive care, an examination of elderly patients who require more thorough diagnostics, or an urgent consultation with a cardiologist. It happens that the necessary medical institution is located hundreds of kilometers away, and you have to spend precious time and money on transportation. Any delay in such circumstances can lead to serious consequences. Irina wants to tell you about her friend Mikhail. He is 73 years old and he has always been an ardent travel lover. It seemed that age could not stop him. However, during one of the cruises, his blood pressure suddenly rose sharply. The crew provided only basic care, but it was clear that urgent hospitalization was needed. The problem was that it was late at night. Many nautical miles remained to the nearest port, and even more to a full-fledged hospital. In the end, Mikhail received the necessary treatment, but this experience turned into a huge stress for him and significant expenses for medical evacuation. Such cases, unfortunately, happen more often than many people think. To avoid such troubles, it is always important to consult a doctor before traveling and undergo all necessary examinations. In addition, it is worth having a basic medical passport with a description of diagnoses, a list of medications, and recommendations. It is necessary to take the required amount of medications with you, preferably with a reserve. If possible, it is worth choosing routes where there is access to quality medical care nearby. Remember that health should always remain the first priority. The main rule is that if the doctor has doubts about whether to postpone the trip or at least shorten its duration, it is better not to take risks. Never should the impressions of foreign beauty outweigh the threat to life. There is a risk of catching an infection, and this circumstance requires special attention. The second important point is related to the health of the traveler, but deserves separate consideration. With age, our immunity weakens, the ability to resist bacteria and viruses decreases, and the immune response can be more difficult and last longer. This means that a cold that would disappear in a few days in a young person can develop into bronchitis or pneumonia in an elderly traveler. Also, stomach problems can cause severe dehydration and lead to hospitalization. The peculiarity of travel in the modern world is movement on planes, trains, buses, where there are many people in closed spaces, each of whom can be a carrier of various microbes. Young people tolerate such contacts quite easily. However, for older people over 70, this is an increased risk. Flights with transfers, numerous meetings with people, and interaction with public surfaces, armrests of chairs, tables, door handles, handrails at airports, create an additional threat. At the same time, sometimes you have to wait a long time, and it is not always possible to thoroughly wash your hands, get some fresh air, or rest peacefully. Particular attention should be paid to exotic countries with unfamiliar food and local water. For the body of an elderly person, pathogens to which it is not adapted can be especially dangerous. Even ordinary consumption of tap water or improperly prepared products can cause serious health problems in such conditions. Eating unwashed vegetables can cause serious health problems, and we are not just talking about the stomach. General immunity after such an infection weakens, opening the way for other diseases. To reduce possible risks, always have antiseptics or wet wipes with a disinfectant composition. Try to avoid suspicious street stalls with food from unverified sources. Drink only bottled water. Carefully check that the lid is sealed. Take several disposable masks with you, especially if you know that long lines or a long flight are ahead. Do not forget to discuss with your doctor whether it is worth getting additional vaccinations before the trip, for example, against the flu or pneumococcus. These precautions may seem unnecessary, but it is better to spend time in advance to reduce the likelihood of unpleasant surprises. This will help to save not only strength and financial resources, but most importantly, health. About a third of travel recovery problems are related to chronic fatigue. Another important factor is fatigue accumulated during the vacation itself. Many people think, "What's the matter? I came here to relax, I'll just chill out." But in reality, especially in adulthood, vacations sometimes turn into a continuous marathon. In order to have time to go on all the excursions, you have to overcome long journeys between cities, experience time zone and climate changes. If at 30 all this is perceived as an adventure, then after 40 the body needs much more time to adapt and restore sleep. Often people do not realize that they are constantly on their feet, and as a result their body experiences severe fatigue. First comes the excursion program, then there is the move again, and as a result, dizziness, joint pain, and leg swelling appear. Sometimes more serious complications arise, for example, exacerbation of varicose veins or high blood pressure. Recovering in a new place is much more difficult, especially when the usual amenities are absent, such as a comfortable chair, orthopedic mattress, and silence. It is especially difficult for those who are trying to see everything in one trip. For example, many choose a tour in which you need to visit 5 cities in 10 days and add a couple of days at the sea. As a result, instead of the joy of new impressions, constant haste and chronic fatigue appear. The body does not have time to adapt, sleep becomes disturbed, and proper rest fades into the background. To avoid such problems, first of all, plan a more relaxed schedule. It is better to visit fewer places, but have more time for rest and recovery. Secondly, be sure to take into account your individual characteristics. If you know that you are prone to pressure surges, you need to take breaks and rest before moving again. Thirdly, choose tour operators or routes specially designed to meet the needs of older people. There are now specialized programs that take into account the pace of movement, daily routine, frequent rest stops, and other important nuances. The high risk of injury and falls in unfamiliar surroundings is a serious problem that is often overlooked. Before traveling, older people often face a decrease in bone density and deterioration in motor coordination. So even if you walk without a stick at home and feel confident, an unfamiliar road can be difficult. Dizzying slippery slabs and steep stairs, deceptive curbs, and simply uneven surfaces create a very real danger. Imagine a situation where a person is rushing to a tour bus, dragging a suitcase on wheels behind him, suddenly falls and gets a broken arm or hip. Such injuries for an elderly body can have serious consequences, up to a long rehabilitation and even the loss of the ability to take care of oneself. If everything happened in a foreign country, then the difficulties of communicating with medical personnel in an incomprehensible language and the lack of insurance can aggravate stress and increase financial costs. Don't forget about the difficulties associated with moving around inside a vehicle, whether it's a bus or a train. Pushing or sudden braking can easily throw a person with poor coordination off balance. It's fine if you're just sitting still at that moment, but imagine leaving the toilet on a train or walking down the aisle on an airplane. The risk of falling becomes very high. How to avoid such troubles? Choose comfortable shoes with a reliable non-slip sole. At the first, if you feel unsure, use a cane or Nordic walking pole to support yourself. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Airport staff, bus passengers, or tour guides are always there to support you. Also, don't drag heavy luggage yourself. It's better to use the services of porters or buy quality suitcases on wheels that are easy to roll. Plan your routes in such a way as to avoid steep climbs and dangerous stairs. In old age, safety should be a priority. One wrong step can cross out all the joyful impressions of the trip. After all, it is much more important to maintain health and enjoy each trip without unnecessary risks. The fifth thing we absolutely do not want is complications with insurance and financial issues. This aspect is incredibly important. It is not only about the cost of the tour itself, tickets, and accommodation. The key point is insurance. Many elderly people mistakenly believe that their regular medical insurance will protect them from any problems abroad. But in practice, this is not always the case. Insurance companies often set age limits, lists of diseases that are covered, as well as many small conditions in the contract. Some insurance policies simply do not work for those over 65 or 70 years old, or require a significant surcharge. Imagine being hospitalized abroad without the right insurance or with the wrong policy. The bill for treatment can be simply staggering. Add to this the stress of having to understand a foreign language, translate medical documents and receipts. On top of that, there may be costs for emergency evacuation, which can sometimes cost tens of thousands of dollars. Another unpleasant financial surprise is unexpected situations with trip cancellation. At 70 and older, health can fail at the very last moment. Undergo surgery, fall ill with a virus, or notice a sudden heart problem. Tour operators and airlines often do not refund money, especially if there are only a few days left before departure. As a result, you lose money for a trip that never took place. How to avoid troubles? It is necessary to carefully study all the points of the insurance policies. Pay attention to age restrictions and what cases are insured. This will help protect yourself from unpleasant surprises during travel. Whenever possible, choose tickets and rooms with a refund option or flexible dates, even if it costs more. This is especially important if you are planning a long trip with transfers. Insurance companies usually cover all stages of your route. Be aware of the risk of fraud, especially when you find unusually good deals online. Always check the seller's reputation and carefully read reviews. If in doubt, it is better to consult with travel insurance specialists to avoid unpleasant situations related to cancellations or changes in plans. Many people forget about the increased level of psychological stress that can arise when they are away from home. Traveling brings joy and inspiration, but long journeys and changes in environment can cause anxiety, especially for older people, for whom every little thing seems important. A new country is not only interesting sights, but also an unfamiliar language, rules, and culture. It is easy to get confused if your luggage is suddenly lost or you need help. Often, older tourists remember how they began to worry even when packing their suitcase. What if I forgot the necessary medicine? How will I explain myself in a foreign country if I feel sick? This is internal anxiety, accumulates and can result in nervous tension or even panic attacks. If something goes wrong during your trip, such as a flight delay or other unforeseen situations, your worries and fears only increase. It is important to think in advance about who to contact in difficult situations and what support options are available to avoid unnecessary stress and maintain the enjoyment of your trip. Advanced preparation and information will help you feel more confident and calm in any situation. The route may change, and this situation can worsen the general condition. Do not forget that psychological well-being is closely related to physical health. Blood pressure increases, sleep is disturbed, appetite decreases. As a result, the body of an elderly person is under double stress due to constant movement and stress factors. To reduce the likelihood of a bad mood, prepare in advance. Print out reservations, save emergency numbers, and learn a short phrase in the local language. For example, "I need medical help," or "Where is the nearest pharmacy?" Plan a trip with less dynamics. Long live rest and the opportunity to gradually adapt to new conditions. If possible, travel with someone close or a friend. This will make it easier to cope with surprises. If you have any difficulties, master breathing and relaxation techniques that help you calm down quickly in unfamiliar situations. Another common problem is nutrition. For older people, this is a challenge. They often adhere to special diets due to hypertension, diabetes, or stomach problems. It can be especially difficult to find familiar food abroad. Too spicy or fatty food, a lot of sauces and spices that have not been used before can easily appear on the table. Even if the food seems appetizing, the body can react unexpectedly. In addition, there is not always access to fresh fruits, vegetables, and clean water. Some hotels provide a minimal selection, which also complicates the selection of a diet. Restaurants with a limited selection of dishes aimed at tourists often use flavor enhancers. For a young and healthy person, this can be an interesting culinary experience, and for the elderly, a real threat of an attack or exacerbation of chronic diseases. What to do? If possible, it is worth choosing accommodation where it is possible to cook or at least heat up familiar food yourself. Rooms with a mini kitchen or apartments are often much more convenient than standard hotel rooms. It is also useful to clarify the composition of the dishes and ask to reduce the amount of salt and spices. Most reputable establishments treat such requests with understanding. Don't forget about your drinking regimen. When traveling, many people get carried away with excursions and forget to drink water regularly, and it is vital for an elderly body to maintain a normal water balance. To avoid problems, you can take your usual snacks with you: biscuits, dried fruits, crackers, nuts. These are the products that do not spoil for a long time and can be a real salvation on a long journey. You should carefully monitor restrictions in mobility and the need for special infrastructure. It is also worth remembering that not every tourist location is suitable for people with limited mobility or health problems. People over the age of 70 often suffer from arthritis, joint pain, and shortness of breath, which makes long walks difficult. especially if you have to overcome steep slopes every time. Stairs or cobblestones in the historic city center. Many attractions in old towns do not have lifts or ramps, and wheelchair maneuverability is severely limited. This also applies to public transport, as many countries do not have low-floor buses or steps that are suitable for seniors. This means that you risk missing out on many interesting places simply because it is physically impossible to get there. Trying to overcome such obstacles by force can cause harm to health or injury. How can such situations be avoided? It is important to carefully find out about the availability of elevators, escalators, and comfortable sidewalks. If necessary, it is worth booking specialized tours for seniors in advance, where routes are designed with disabilities in mind. Be sure to discuss all the conditions with the travel agency. For example, do you need wheelchair access, special seats on the bus, or a hotel room with ramps? If you are traveling on your own, be sure to read reviews from other tourists and real photos of the area, because they are more reliable than flashy advertising. Do not forget about the impact of adverse climatic conditions. In youth, our body tolerates temperature changes more easily. But with age, sudden changes in weather become a serious challenge. For example, sudden changes in temperature or high humidity can lead to exacerbation of joint pain, heart problems, and migraines. If a person goes to tropical regions with a hot and stuffy climate, there is a risk of heat stroke and dehydration. And a trip to areas with severe winters can cause problems due to slippery roads and icy air. When planning a trip in sub-zero temperatures, it is important to consider the time of year. Sometimes it is better to choose a trip in the so-called velvet season, when the air temperature is more comfortable. It is necessary to provide the possibility of resting indoors. If it becomes too cold or unpleasant outside, it should be possible to take shelter, for example, in air-conditioned rooms, or warm up with warm clothes that allow the skin to breathe. In high heat, it is important to choose the right wardrobe that will not weigh you down and will allow the body to feel normal. Medical care is also important to remember. In hot climates, there is a high risk of dehydration, and in cold places, the likelihood of heart disease worsening increases. Another important factor is emotional expectations, which often diverge from the reality of travel. Older people fondly remember how easy it was to travel many years ago. Overnight stays in budget hostels did not cause anxiety, and transfers and connections were perceived as part of the adventure. However, over the years, our capabilities change, and we may not notice how much we have slowed down. We get tired much faster, and it is harder to bear heat or cold. As a result, it happens that there is not enough energy for planned excursions on site, and the desire to spend an evening in the city gives way to the need to relax in the room. Psychological disappointment is also important to consider. You expect bright emotions and impressions, but are faced with discomfort, back pain, problems with housing, or anxiety about your own well-being. All this sometimes causes a feeling of disappointment or even guilt. Why can't I travel the way I used to? And why does this affect my overall travel experience? To avoid these situations, it's important to be open with yourself and understand your physical and emotional capabilities. It is normal to have less energy at 70 than at 40. Lower your expectations. The main goal should be to enjoy a few leisurely walks and visit one or two interesting places. If you can see more, that's great, but don't overload yourself from morning to evening. Plan a backup vacation in case you get tired. Let yourself spend time in a hotel or walk nearby, rather than rushing to the opposite side of town. Maintain a positive attitude. Sometimes it is wiser to limit yourself in something, but maintain a good mood and health, than to exhaust yourself in the race for everything that is written in the guidebook. The main advice that I would like to give is that traveling after 70 is possible if you have the strength and desire. But now it is not an extreme adventure that many are proud of in their youth. It will require careful preparation, an objective assessment of your resources and precautions that were not necessary in previous years. The main rule at this age is never to sacrifice your health for the sake of another excursion or dubious savings. If you doubt whether you can withstand a 15-hour flight, consult a doctor, listen carefully to his advice, and if necessary, choose routes with convenient transfers. Or you can choose a destination that is closer and more convenient. If you feel strong enough, be sure to get quality health insurance that takes your age into account. It is important to understand the terms of its validity. Always keep a reserve of money for unexpected expenses if the trip is suddenly canceled due to health reasons. Do not blame yourself for this, because health is much more important than beautiful shots on social networks. Many elderly people, having decided to abandon long and difficult routes, find wonderful places near home: sanatoriums, summer cottages, excursions to neighboring cities. From an exotic point of view, this may not be as impressive as an ocean cruise, but it is much safer, cheaper, and brings a lot of positive emotions. If you want, you can go further and organize a trip abroad, but it is always better to carefully calculate and prepare everything in advance. If these thoughts are close to you, write in the comments what you think about traveling in old age. Do you agree that after 60 you should be especially careful, or do you think that age should not limit? Put a like. If this information was useful to you, share the video with friends and relatives who are also thinking about whether to go on a long-awaited trip. And one more thing, if you watch the video to the end, write the number 10 in the comments. This will mean that you figured out the reasons and are ready to warn yourself and your loved ones about possible difficulties. This will help me understand who really listened carefully. You have shown interest and have carefully read the topic. Thank you for your time. I hope that you have learned something useful for yourself and will now take a more conscious approach to organizing your trips. Do not forget that at any age you can happily go on trips if you act wisely and honestly assess your capabilities. Take care of your health. Take care of yourself and those who are dear to you. Let your trips be filled with only pleasant emotions and unforgettable impressions. See you soon.